As you all know, we are Public Child Protection Wales. My name's Lucia Thomas. I'm one of the founding members of the organisation. This organisation was born thanks to the knowledge and research and voice, big voice, of one woman, and that's Kimberly Isherwood. And we all owe a lot to Kimberly. She really has opened all our eyes. She wasn't going to let this comprehensive sexuality education come into the UK without a fight. So today, everyone, is our second annual conference. Our first one last year was very successful. We're focusing today on our International Child Protection Taskforce. And they are all joining us today and will be speaking throughout the morning. This afternoon, then, we're going to have a UK panel and an international panel. So we've got all that to look forward to. So what I'm going to ask for everyone, we're going to have a couple of breaks throughout the day, but I am going to ask for everyone to be back promptly at the time specified so we can get through everything swiftly. So I'm not going to stand here and talk much more because, as I said, we're already late. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So our first speaker is UK-based. Herself and her group has done lots of work protecting children, raising awareness, working with parents in England. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rebecca Manning from Too Much Too Young. Welcome, Rebecca. Woo!
Thank you very much, Lucia. And good morning to everyone. For anyone that don't know who I am, my name's Rebecca Manning and I am part of the group Too Much Too Young. We are long-time supporters of Public Child Protection Wales. Welcome to the start of their second annual conference. Bigger and bolder than before, they have international speakers lined up for you today, as well as us usual faces who I hope you're not sick of seeing yet. Thank you to Public Child Protection Wales for organising this wonderful opportunity to give the people here a chance to hear from such fantastic advocates for children. And thank you to all of you for being here. I love these gatherings and being in a room full of people who, for some reason or another, have been able to see that something is going very wrong in our country and around the world. A bit sooner than the majority of the population. Not only have you all seen it, you've all looked into it, and the most important step, you've tried to do something about it. Although the RSC is the little section of all the wrongs that I focus on, I suppose being a mother and working with children, it was the part I felt most strongly about. We all know it's not the only problem though. Agenda 2030 is getting very close now. We can see all the cogs whirring as the populations are being moved ever closer to the globalist goal. And still, frustratingly, many are so busy with their day-to-day lives, they don't take time to look up and see that the problems are coming from global initiatives that our countries have all signed up to simultaneously by some weird coincidence, if we still believed in those. They are not seeing that we are being socially conditioned and have been all our lives. They are not seeing that the changes are not organic and natural, but instead are carefully engineered over many decades, starting before any of us were even born. Well, welcome to a room full of people who can all see, pretty clearly now after all the reading we've done, and who are acting on what they see. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have followed and supported Public Child Protection Wales for a good while now. At the beginning of this fight, they were our inspiration. More recently, though, I'm proud to say we have become more closely aligned, collaborating together on projects for the benefit of all our children. One of which it's my privilege to announce to you today. But first, I'll give you a little backstory. Last autumn, Too Much Too Young and Public Child Protection Wales attended Washington, D.C. to meet with our international friends. We are fortunate that some of them have been able to be here today to speak to you about the situation in their own countries. Whilst there, we delivered information packs around Congress, asking for a bill from the 90s to be revived that was smothered at the time, I think most of us here understand at this point what a cover-up is. Had this bill gotten the traction it should have back then, the damage to children could have been stopped in its tracks, but instead it has seeped out around the world. Unethical, disproven already, but still being applied to all our children's education. We had to try, so working together with Public Child Protection Wales, we've produced a UK version of the American bill. It's called the Child Protection and Research Ethics Bill 2026. Our bill will seek to have any legislation or guidance that's built on unethical data sets removed from all our institutions here in the UK. Even better, we have managed to get someone to listen to us and have a meeting on Monday morning in Portcullis House to begin our campaign to push our bill forward. We'll be able to tell you more about that at the rally at Parliament Square Gardens in the afternoon of the 20th at 1 p.m. Hopefully, we'll have some good news to bring to you all. It's been a very big year for Too Much Too Young. We've had to up our game quite a lot to keep up with Public Child Protection Wales. We have a new website, which is www.toomuchtooyoung.co.uk, which has some fantastic resources on already. We've finally started fundraising ourselves after self-funding for the first few years, and we're finding new ways to push forward against this curriculum, as well as still assisting parents in how to stand up themselves. If you'd like to come and visit us on our stall, please do. Thank you all for your time listening to me today, and I hope you all have an informative, interesting, and a fun day. Thank you very much.
I always pray before I come, and I say, Lord, get me to the remnant. So obviously you're here for such a time as this, for this information. So I thank you for coming out today. I do have British roots. I had the Bates family from England came over on my mother's side, and the Robertson clan, so from Scotland. So I feel like I'm at home. My presentation is called Getting to the Root of the Problem. Whenever you want to take out a tree, you don't just cut off the branches. You don't just cut off the trunk. You have to dig the root out. And that's exactly what this presentation is I hope to connect some dots as to what is happening. And I know we're talking about sex education, but sex education came out of the sexual revolution. My background is I'm a registered nurse, and I was a sex educator. I was the one that went into the schools and taught children about sex. I was told parents aren't doing their job, so I need to go in there and do it for them. And you're going to hear this lie that if you talk to children about sex, they're going to go out and do it, and that's simply not true. You're actually going to decrease the pregnancy and the STD rate among the teenagers. And I thought, well, I could do that. I can help parents. I was newly married. We didn't have children yet. I did that for 5 years, and then we were blessed with our first child, and I still wanted to work for the health department part-time. So the only job available in the health department was working in the STD HIV clinic, where we treat people who have sexually transmitted diseases. And I saw some alarming trends, and I saw the opposite of what I've been told. I saw that children are becoming sexually active at earlier and earlier ages, and I was very concerned. 5 years after that, our oldest is entering kindergarten into a Lutheran school, a Christian school, and the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod came out with the first Christian sex education program in the 1960s. And I started to do the deep dive into the origins of that because it seemed like the children coming out of the churches were no different than the children who didn't know God. And I found that the series had been developed by Hugh Hefner, Planned Parenthood, and a man by the name of Alfred Kinsey. So I thought, wow, that is really huge. So Matthew 18, verses 15 to 17 said, if your brother's sinning, you go to them. If they don't listen, you go with someone else. If it doesn't work, you take it to the church. Well, what happens when the entire church is in error? And that has been my 30-year journey. So it's been a long haul. So sex education is just the tip of a very large iceberg. Sex education came out of the sexual revolution. It was funded by the foundations, the wealthy elite. It was put into our institutions, and it was infiltrated into the foundations in our society. Every institution in America was infiltrated. I don't care if you're in education, medicine, law, military, or government, or church. You were infiltrated in every area. The plan was to shift America away from God. And ultimately, if we go back to Genesis, it was a battle between good and evil. America is, we have the term one nation under God. We are known as a Christian nation, but we're not a Christian nation because we have more Christians or churches. We're a Christian nation because our laws and our government were founded on the principles of the Old and New Testament. Going back to our founders, refer to England and William Blackstone's commentaries of laws that were extremely influential in our founders who signed the Declaration of Independence. They said, upon these two foundations, the law of nature and the laws of revelation, which was the Bible, depend all human laws. And that is why America has been so successful. But then came the wealthy elite who, it says in Psalms 2:2, there were those that wanted to be the kings of the earth. And they actually became the fourth branch of our government. This book, Foundations, Their Power and Influence, is a book written in the 1950s by one of our lawyers that was a congressional aide, and talked about how by the 1950s, America was already starting to see a shift, a moral shift. And they thought, could it be the Fords, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers? They had started up a foundation, tax-exempt foundations in the 1920s. And some of these foundations were doing really great things, but some of those foundations were doing some things that were a little iffy. They were funding, for example, Margaret Sanger from Planned Parenthood. They were funding, they started up the American Law Institute in 1923, and then they funded a guy by the name of Alfred Kinsey. So they concluded at the end of the Congress was worried about this, so they did the investigation. The Reese Committee concluded that the Kinsey reports were a deliberate attack on Judeo-Christian morality. So you ask yourself, well, why would the wealthy elite want to remove God from America? Well, what happens when you take morality out? You have immorality. What happens when you have immorality? You have chaos. What happens when you have chaos? Well, the government needs to come in and rule over you. Hence, we have communism coming in. The signer of the Declaration of Independence was Samuel Adams, one of the signers, and he said, "A general dissolution of principles and manners will more surely overthrow the liberties of America than the whole force of the common enemy. While the people are virtuous, they cannot be subdued. But when once they lose their virtue, they will be ready to surrender their liberties to the first external and internal invader." So I always say that morality is your biggest national security issue. And for America, what is happening? We are being invaded internally and externally. So how do you shift a Christian nation away from God? Well, if you look to Scripture, how did the Israelites mess up? Usually it was sexual immorality. Well, where do you aim the attack first? Well, you aim the attack at men because they are the head of the family. So hence, pornography was legalized in America in the 1950s. You aim the attack at marriage because it is the foundation of the family. And it wasn't same-sex marriage that destroyed marriage in America. Back it up. It used to be against the law to have sex outside of marriage. That was called fornication. It was against the law to commit adultery, and we didn't have anything called no-fault divorce. So all of these things began to erode traditional marriage in America. And then you have to aim the attack at children. You have to raise them up to believe that they are sexual beings from birth. So I came across a man by the name of Alfred Kinsey, and I had never heard of him before. I had heard the term children are sexual from birth in medical school, but I never understood where that came from. And for me, I'm not thinking perverse, I'm thinking differently, but Kinsey actually meant perverse. He was a zoologist at Indiana University. He studied the sexual behavior of the gall wasp. The media portrayed him as a happily married man with children, but in actuality, his own people admit he's a homosexual sadomasochist who believed in all sexual rights. He did his research in the 1930s and 40s, and his studies were then published in 1948 as Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, 1953, Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. What is interesting about his data is it was not objective, it was subjective. He went into the prisons, he sought out the most sexually deviant criminal and said, this is the typical sexual behavior of the American male. He interviewed prostitutes, and if they lived with their pimp for more than a year, he said, this is the typical sexual behavior of the American married female. And for his childhood data, he interviewed pedophiles who had raped children. He was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, and eventually U.S. tax dollars funded his research. Dr. Judith Reisman, I see her picture back there. She was the #1 expert on Kinsey, and she trained Rhonda and I, so we knew her personally for some years. A wonderful lady. And she found herself on a talk show in 1990s sitting next to some of Kinsey's associates. One of them was Clarence Tripp, who had photographed some of the horrible things that they did. And Phil Donahue, who was the host, interviewed, they put up some data that Kinsey had on children. And they're like, how did he get this data? And Clarence Tripp said, they listened to only pedophiles. They were very careful. They used stopwatches. They knew how to record their thing. So Kinsey has Table 34, which documents how many orgasms do children have in a certain amount of time, starting from 5 months old up to the age of 14. And there's a poor 4-year-old that they documented 26 orgasms in 24 hours. A child was raped for 24 hours. And so how do you know that a baby is having an orgasm? How do you know that a toddler is having an orgasm? This is in Kinsey's book. Sobbing, sometimes with extreme abundance of tears, especially among younger children, afflicted with extreme trembling, collapse, and sometimes fainting. Kinsey wrote that children enjoy the experience, although many fight away the partner, not the perpetrator, but the partner. So the media, back in the 50s, started to promote this revolutionary scientist that was doing wonderful things. And here is the picture of Table 34. I have people who take Table 34 to school board meetings and say, this is where the sex education comes from. And this is where sex education comes from. Because if they are sexual from birth, we need to, in Kinsey's eyes, we need to train them how to have better sex. That's what sex education is. So Kinsey, after he did his research, his conclusions, he said all sex laws are broken, thus they should be eliminated. Rape is really a myth. So all of those laws need to be removed or downgraded. Sex should be shared with everyone. He believed in womb to tomb. All sexual experimentation before marriage will increase a long-term successful marriage, and venereal disease will be reduced dramatically. Now, we have statistics that show, of course, the exact opposite of that. Children are sexual from birth. That's where that came from. He said adult-child sex and incest is not harmful to children. He said everyone is bisexual. He also claimed that 37% of all men are homosexual. And again, where was he interviewing but the sexually deviant criminal in prison? So the Kinsey reports were used, I think I gotta click it, yeah. The Kinsey reports were used by our state commissions and revision committees. They said, our laws, which we had since the founding of America, our common law had been the same until the 1950s. And then they came in and said, it's too old and antiquated. We need to update the laws. We need to get with the modern times. We're evolving. So draft number 4, the American Law Institute's Model Penal Code, was issued in 1955. Of 197 footnotes, Kinsey is the sole authority on normal human sexual behavior in the sex offense section. So the states, what they did is the State Revision Committee, the first one being in Wisconsin and Illinois, they passed the Kinsey-based Model Penal Code, and then it was a domino effect. It went from state to state to state. And we actually found that in Texas, they adopted the Model Penal Code on May 16th in 1973, which happens to be when Roe versus Wade, when we legalized abortion that same year, so, which came out of Texas, by the way. So Texas was very key in all of this. So the birth of sex education. Sex education was not meant to decrease pregnancy and STD rates. It was meant to groom children. Think about it. Knowledge, when you go to get a surgical procedure, you have to consent to that, right? Knowledge is consent. So if we are educating children on sexuality, they then are can be consenting now because we've gone ahead and told them this. We've told them that they are sexual from birth. We've told them of all these various practices and devious lifestyles. So now they can consent. This is a picture, by the way, of Kinsey showing, this is back in the 1940s, showing children in a classroom animals copulating over and over and over again, because pornography was illegal. I mean, if he could have, he would have shown porn to them directly. But you can see that the children don't seem to be enjoying that too much. So there was an organization that was formed. It was launched from the Kinsey Institute in 1964, and it's called SIECUS, which is Sex Information Council, Sex Information Education Council of the United States. And there's a woman by the name of Claire Chambers in 1973. She started to do the deep dive into who are all the organizations involved in SIECUS. So you have sex publishers, and these are publishers of school books, by the way. We have all the religious institutions that were infiltrated with this, that were involved with this. We have our primary education system that was involved with this. You have the International, UNESCO, of course, the UN, the Council on Foreign Relations. You have, of course, Kinsey Institute, Waldor Palmeri, who worked with Kinsey, Mary Calderon, who worked with Kinsey, Margaret Sanger, of course, from Planned Parenthood, and Hugh Hefner is involved. So you have the porn industry, you have the abortion industry. What a great business model. You go in, you sexualize the kid, and you get them hooked on porn, and you get them getting abortions. Brilliant, brilliant marketing plan. So, of course, you have the WHO, the NIH. So, again, this is big. This is really big. It went global. So what happened to America? By the way, we took prayer out in 62. We took Bible reading out of the schools in 63. And in 64, it is by no accident, we put sex ed in our schools. Take God out, put sex ed in. So look at the statistics. This is national statistics. Sexually transmitted disease for children between the ages, gonorrhea, between the ages of 10 and 14. And you can see in the 60s, relatively low, and then it takes off. You have birth rates to unwed girls, 15 to 19 years old. Again, relatively low in the 60s, and then it takes off. Then what happened to the American family once you started to sexualize the children? The family fell apart. This is single-parent households. Female had no spouse present. So it's interesting to note who Kinsey's disciples were. Hugh Hefner, who founded the porn industry. He worked with Kinsey to fund the porn industry, or found the porn industry. Mary Calderon, who happened to have been the medical director of Planned Parenthood, she was key and instrumental in developing the concept of sex education. Then we have Harry Hay, who came from New Zealand. Penny's going to be speaking today. He was the founder John Money is the one who came from New Zealand, who was the founder of the trans movement. Harry Hay was the founder of the civil gay rights movement. So these are key to the foundations of what we're dealing with today. So what can a few dedicated people do? Because this was not the majority of America. These were a small group of people back in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s who said, we need to change the world. And this is what one of Kinsey's, Ira Reese, said. He said, to build sexual pluralism, we must firmly root out the narrow thinking about sex that exists in all our institutions: family, political, economic, religious, and educational. We need to change our whole basic social institutional structure. We don't need a majority of the nation in order to make a significant change in our society. We only need a small percent of the population who are dedicated to promoting all of our sexual rights. How successful has that small group been? Is it not amazing? Is it not amazing? So something that those of us, all the speakers here, know is back to the good and evil. You have God's team and you have Satan's team. And this team, especially those at the top, love our children, but they love our children in a different way. They love to rape our children. They love to torture our children. They love to sacrifice our children to Satan. And they love to eat our children. And we are dealing with the most demonic forces. Here is Kinsey, a picture in the upper corner there of Kinsey. He was at Aleister Crowley, who was known as the Beast, came from England, Satan worshiper. He is in Aleister Crowley's temple in Sicily, where he would rape, torture, murder, and sacrifice babies to Satan. And Kinsey is there marveling. He wished he could have gotten all of his, because he recorded what he did. And Kinsey wanted those diaries. So we have now, when we go and battle in our state legislators, in our legislative offices, or if we go to the Capitol buildings, guess who's there? The Satanists are there as well. So we now have Satan clubs at our schools. So again, you have to understand this is spiritual warfare. For those of you who are Christian, understand this is spiritual warfare, and you better armor up. You better put on that full armor of God. So how do you restore, big question, how do you restore biblical foundations to our nation, but to your nations as well? Because some of you have that. Number one is personal repentance. We've all been lied to and deceived. And I realized that myself, that I had bought into a lot of the lies. That means we were the first generation to have been indoctrinated. We had a new identity. We're not made in the image and likeness of God. Rather, we are sexual beings who need to embrace our sexuality. Start with prayer and reflection on your own life. I always say this to audiences. Because I have parents who come up to me because I talk to parent groups and they say, how can I possibly teach my child about biblical purity when I messed up in that area? And I have to remind them that we have a loving Savior who died on the cross for our sins, all sins. And all we have to do is repent. He forgives and he restores. So leave it at the cross. Don't be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. We have to model purity to our children. What we watch, they pick up on that. What we say, they pick up on. So it's important that we're modeling for our children. Are we honoring God in all that we say and do? Number two, pray, fast and pray, activate prayer groups. This is a global attack on children. This is a plan to destroy not just our nation, but all nations. This is to get us into that one world order. And I like the verse of Nehemiah. He said, I looked and arose and said to the nobles, leaders, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Number three, protect and prepare our children. This is a job for parents and not for the schools. The parents are to instill the morals into their children. The schools can come along, but we're finding that the schools are teaching new morals different morals to our children. So it's important on that. Number 4, educate, educate, educate. Spread the word. I changed my prayer to, Lord, just get me to the remnant, because I kept knocking on church doors. And there are not a lot of churches that would have this kind of an event in America. There's only a handful that would have, because the churches have been corrupted. So I like the verse, Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed by lack of knowledge. We need to be aware of what is happening here. That's a picture of me. I was flown into Kentucky to talk to the Kentucky Pro-Life Caucus and awaken them. On the other side is a picture of speaking to 500 parents in Uganda. And then I say, let God amaze you. I was invited to write a Supreme Court brief for a case that came up. It was Paxton versus Free Speech Coalition. It's the first time since the 1950s that our pornography industry was being challenged. And the case was about Texas had passed a law that we made it illegal, that there had to be restrictions on the website so that underage children, you had to prove that you were 18 or older to be able to watch pornography. And the pornography industry and the sex toy industry got together and said, that's discrimination, and we don't want people outed on this. So it went all the way to the Supreme Court. So that's me speaking on the steps of the Supreme Court. And then presentation. I have been to Uganda 4 times, and in 2019, the first time I went was at the moment that country was about to put sex ed in their schools. And the Minister of Ethics and Integrity, somehow I ended up in front of Parliament members, and I got to do this presentation. And the Minister of Ethics and Integrity, Dr. Nasaba Baturo, got up, and he said, Professor Warner, never have I heard such talk. He said, in our hearts, we knew it was wrong, but we didn't know why. You just gave us the why. So let God wow you when you get this information. And the national action. Some of the ladies in the room and Eugene were with us in Washington, D.C., and we went office to office. We are going nationally. We're trying to resurrect. In 1995, there was an attempt to have nationally recognized that Kinsey is a fraud. He is a rapist, a pedophile, and his stuff being taught in our universities, the entire field of human sexuality, comes from him. So Congress in 1995 put together a bill that not only were they investigating Kinsey, but they were going to, if found that these crimes had indeed committed, purge human sexuality, Kinsey stuff from the colleges. Could you imagine purging the field of human sexuality? That takes it all out in one swipe. So again, let's go back to the tree. What happens when you get to the root of the tree, which is Kinsey science? And you have the Rockefeller Foundation, you have the CIA and the MK Ultra. You have the United Nations that's pushing sexualizing our children. And then ultimately you have you take care of abortion, all the branches. Let's not just fight one branch. Let's take the whole tree down. And that's what we're going for. So this is my contact information. I've donated a book for the raffle today, and I want to donate one to the church here today as well. 10 tips on how not to talk to your kids about sex. So the first 100 pages is the history of the sexual revolution and sex education. Second half is biblical principles on how do we raise pure kids in today's culture, and it can be done. So I thank you for your time.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for putting this conference on today. So it has been an honor to be able to work alongside many of our colleagues internationally now as we have spread the word about what Kinsey did. Audrey just gave you a brief indication of that, and so you are going to go a little bit deeper as we go through this one, but I am the CEO of Purple for Parents United. We're a grassroots organization that really went after what was happening in Indiana, because Indiana Hoosiers is what we go by, had no idea that Alfred Kinsey had set up camp in our state. And so I was on an effort to educate them about the responsibility that was carried. Independent researcher now for 14 years, became a public speaker. I'm a natural introvert, so the Lord put me in front of this people to talk about sex, talk about a real serious sense of humor. That would be it. And for the first time testified in committee at the State House and had never done that before. So here I am today. My husband and I will be celebrating 36 years of marriage this October, and we have 3 kids. Our oldest was captured by the educational system. So we're going to start here, give you a little bit of historical background. I'm going to take you on a timeline, and I'm going to take you on the funding mechanisms that are behind all of this. Right here you will see, back in 1727, the Illuminati started essentially this one world government that they had devised. You can see there they set up all these entities on the outlying framework. The names in the umbrella are the 13 bloodline families. We're going to spend some time today going a little bit further into the Rockefellers. Essentially what they've done is they've created the United Nations, and they've developed Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, which you heard about earlier. So here is what the Rockefellers were behind. You can go on our website, and you can see this document that Dr. Judith Reisman and I worked on. Kinsey, Rockefeller Foundation, and the MK Ultra. It's a very heavy document to read, but it goes into great detail as to what was going on. The Rockefellers funded Kinsey. The CIA protected him. Our intelligence agency protected him. In fact, we believe strongly that Indiana University was one of the universities that the CIA used after World War II to destroy our country from within. You can see right here at the bottom, that is right off the Rockefeller website. They were bragging about the fact that they funded the sexual revolution. And right there you can see this is the Kinsey scale. You could be anywhere from 0 to 6. 0 completely heterosexual, 6 completely homosexual, and you could be anything in between any given point of the day. This is what's driving all this gender perversion for our kids. Audrey went over this tree. I'm just going to show it to you again real quickly. Again, we're going to go after the root of it, the Kinsey Institute. This right here is what I want you to really understand. The funding of an international moral genocide. Rockefellers and the Carnegies had an agreement in 1918. Rockefeller was going to go after our national education. Carnegie went after it internationally. Okay? Through the National Research Council, the Rockefellers were funding Kinsey. So in 1948 and 53, he wrote his books. And you can see there on 1923, Carnegie then starts funding the Johns Hopkins University, which is where John Money came from, okay? He was the first doctor to perform transgender surgery on a set of twins, and it went horribly wrong. They both ended up committing suicide later on after he had sexually experimented on them, converted the one boy into a girl, and then the young man found out later on what had happened to him. He ended up committing suicide, and then his brother did later on. So you need to understand, again, as Audrey said, Alfred Kinsey helped set up these SECAS, which you'll learn about more in a minute, but what I need to understand is Rockefellers and Carnegies essentially have funded the publishing companies, the sex ed curriculum, and the educational curriculum. As Gates said in a video in 2009, they'll know they're successful when the standards and the curriculum align to the tests. It's all by design. Then the Rockefellers funded the effort in 1955 to change our laws. How many of you know what this is? When Audrey and I were in Dr. Reisman's library a few weeks ago, we understood by having a conversation with another doctor, friend of ours, Dr. Linda Jeffries, that Kinsey helped write the original version of the Wolfenden Report. In 1955, after he published his second book in 55, they changed our laws from common law to the Model Penal Code. Well, 2 years later, they targeted you. Kinsey wanted your laws changed as well as all these international funders. So in 1957, he helped write the original draft of the Wolfenden Report. that was targeting your laws on homosexuality and prostitution. In 1957, you became the target. So as Audrey told you about the CICUS, she showed you how they work through the publishing companies, education, the global network. Well, I want you to understand, these are some of the founding members of CICUS. They were humanists, communists, and Marxists. You can see there, many of them sat on various boards, many of them on various educational institutions, including Indiana University. We're gonna go through this timeline right here. 1953, after World War II, Kinsey's writing his books, the CIA is using him as a tool, Rockefellers are funding him, the MK Ultra experiments began. 1955 is when Kinsey meets Kenneth Anger in the Satanic Temple. 56, the states begin implementing obscenity exemptions, which allowed schools to push pornography into the classrooms, okay, public libraries. 60s and 70s, you had this massive push for sex education. 1962-63, as Audrey said, removed the Bible and prayer. 64 came CICUS. 73, Roe versus Wade made abortion illegal. The 1980s and 90s, you had this satanic panic. People were starting to realize there was something very sinister going on, and all these Satanists were doing their demonic activity. In 1991, you had CICUS, then wrote their first edition of the Guidelines for Comprehensive Sexuality Education. And this is the entity, CASEL, Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. This is the entity who's pushing a lot of the social emotional learning programs into the schools. Social emotional learning, when I really came to understand what it was, I called Judith, and she had told me to watch a lot of MK Ultra videos because I didn't understand what that was. That's how naive I was. So I did, and I called her back and I said, Judith, MK Ultra didn't end in the 70s like they told everybody it did. I said, it went underground, and it has now surfaced as social emotional learning. She said, you, my dear, are 100% correct. Here's what I want you to know. Lilly Pharmaceutical is headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. Lilly Pharmaceutical provided the LSD for the MK Ultra experiments to the CIA. Lilly Pharmaceutical is also the one who is behind implementing social emotional learning. Let that sink in. Big Pharma, providing LSD for the mind control experiments, then is pushing social emotional learning, which is about social engineering through the emotional manipulation, through the lessons, the learning, and the curriculum. That is essentially what social emotional learning is. They were funded, CASEL was funded by the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers, the Gates Foundation, Zuckerberg, Robert Wood Johnson. It's important for you to understand who's really behind all this effort and the funding. And that's what's on the chart. You see Arabella off to the right? How many of you know what Arabella is? Arabella Advisors is incredibly powerful. They've gotten a lot of publicity. They've now recently changed their name, as they often do. But Arabella Advisors raises more money than the two political parties put together. This is who's controlling our elections. This is who's controlling education. This is who's controlling everything. Okay? It's like this big money movement. Hence all these lines. They move money around. But there's a website called influencewatch.org. If you want to write that down, influencewatch.org, where we in America can track all this money. This is an incredible website that I use, and I'll show you in just a minute a book that you can read too, and more about Arabella. But in 2001, this is what happened in the state of Indiana. Lilly Pharmaceuticals, I told you, dumped money in to the University of Indianapolis, okay, which is a Christian school, supposedly. And then comes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, 18 months later, and then Knowledge Works and Lumina Foundations, two other globalist foundations. They start dumping money in. Nobody knew it across the state. 2001, 2005, they then go into the legislature. Lilly has a lot of money, a lot of buying power on our lawmakers. So they go in and they put social emotional learning and cultural competencies into state statute. Then it kind of lays dormant, and not a lot is done with it until 2015, 2016. Lilly then launched a counseling initiative, and all the schools across the state of Indiana competed for this grant money. Now, anybody who's done any research on grant money, you know it comes with strings. So the schools all compete for this money. The money goes out in 2017 and 2018. Think about the time frame here. 2017, 2018, the schools get the money, and so then they go on a 3-year training cycle with this radical Trish Hatch. And I found this out because after our school passed a referendum that included mental health counselors, which raised an alarm bell for me, because I had done enough research on social emotional learning that no, something was not right. So I filed an open records request with our school. And I got a 3-inch binder thick of reports, charts, graphs, emails of what was going on behind the scenes with Lilly's grant money. And that's when I found out what they were doing. They had to bring in the business leaders, the community leaders, and the pastors. They had to indoctrinate the pastors as well. So then we started thinking, okay, well, this is probably why we can't get churches to open their doors and even talk about this issue, because they don't want to know. So this radical Trish Hatch was former vice president of American School Counselors Association. Counselors are deeply involved in this, okay? So she was going around training them for 3 years, 6 days annually, on how to implement the American School Counselor Association position statements. 53 of them, and they're very alarming. Training the counselors on how you transition a child in the school and not tell the parents. How you open up the locker rooms, the bathrooms, the sports teams, shower rooms. It's all in there. But nobody in the state knew this is what was going on. Sadly. Pushing all of this sexual perversion into the schools. Many of the books that were started showing up in our schools were all printed, mostly, between 2015 and you could say even 2025, because they just keep printing them. It's all the pornographic images that are planted in children's head. It's all driven out of this same thing. And these are the people behind it. The position statement, school counselor and social emotional development, school counselor and transgender and non-binary youth, school counselor and student sexual wellness, and the school counselor and LGBTQ youth. Those are just a few of the guidelines the school counselors are being trained on. This here is the Arabella network that's behind most of it. This network here, you can make the connections to, obviously, the Gates Foundation, because they're big funders, down here in the bottom left, of Arabella. KnowledgeWorks and Lumina Foundations, you can make the connections to as well. But this is the network. They just added 2021 Telescope Fund and the Impetus Fund. But this is how they're moving money back and forth to control your elections, to control education, to control the medical field. They control everything. Because when Kinsey did what he did, the Rockefellers then sent him out across the world to train every facet of society on this perversion. This is the book written by Scott Walter in the bottom right-hand corner. I would strongly encourage you, if you can get a copy of it, to order it, because it's well worth the read to help you understand. So, more timeline. 2009, I already showed you the historical context up to this point. 2009, UNESCO then releases their first international technical guidance on sexuality education. And then in 2013, Kinsey's then given consultative status to the United Nations. So his perversion then went global, because what happened is they used our tax dollars then to basically blackmail other countries. You either pervert your children or you get no US aid. As Audrey can tell you story after story, about Uganda. This is what they were doing, especially under Obama. Okay. In 2015, you had the increase in the pornographic books that were then coming into the schools and the public libraries. It's all by design. Because remember, who's controlling the publishing companies? Right? We had a young man on our team. We were fighting the pornography in Indiana. I said, go get me the connections to these publishing companies. We had made a list. For 3 years, we made a different list of all the pornographic books. And you would see publishing company after publishing company showing up. So I said, go get me the connections to the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. Didn't take him long. He comes right back and he goes, it's all connected. Yeah, because they control the publishing companies, just like they control the media. They control what books are going out to the schools and what your kids are reading. This is why it's creating a lot of mental issues for children. Some of these books are incredibly pornographic. Not only are they pornographic, but you've got murder, you've got suicide, you've got all these facets that are screwing up our young children's minds. It's intentional, because who wins in the end? When the children are screwed up, they go get on a pill. And Lilly, one of the pharmaceuticals, benefits very much so. Then you had the US, like I said, begin blackmailing for grooming. So currently, what's happening? Well, this is a bill. How's Kinsey influenced current policy? He's still doing it. So this year, we had an anti-grooming bill that we were trying to pass at the State House. You'll see one of our friends here in a minute, Michelle Peterson, we were working with her to do it. And so this bill was coming through, and this legislator in the upper right-hand corner, Beth White, she's working with ISCA, the Indiana Coalition to End Sexual Assault. They were one of the people there testifying in favor of this bill that left 14 to 17-year-olds vulnerable. Our legislators refused to expand the bill to protect that age group, which that age group is the most vulnerable to grooming. So we were pushing back. Well, then we did some research and found out the connections. That organization was working directly with the House representative who wouldn't listen and refused to expand the protection. So I said, go get me the connection, because I'll guarantee there's one with Kinsey Institute. Sure enough, the organization had been holding a coffee and tea, if you will, at the Kinsey Institute. That tells you how much power and influence this institute still has. So as you can see there, this is the new director, Justin Garcia. This is the statute of Kinsey. They very much revere him on the campus. The whole campus is demonic and sexually perverted, just so you know. That is the statute that they just put up there a few years ago. And same sacrificial ideology as Jeffrey Epstein. And we can make connections to the Kinsey Institute from Jeffrey Epstein's releases. So, what have been the victories? Because there have been some. So let's talk about those. Well, since we've gone on an educational war, if you will, to help people understand in America what's going on, Indiana was one of the ones who overturned their obscenity exemption loophole. There was a lot of yellow on this map to start with, okay? We are by one, we are flipping the states. Texas did it in 2025. We did it in 2023. States are starting to push back, and they're starting to repeal some of those Kinsey-based laws. So we're very thankful for that, because that's what we need. This young lady right here, she's a friend of mine, very courageous woman. She got elected to position in the State House. In 2022, she was elected. 2023, she went into office. And we said to her, what will you help us with? We gave her a list of things. She said, well, what do you want me to help with the most? I said, I want you to help me go after the Kinsey Institute. She said, okay. So 2023 was budget year. So we had her hold the amendment. She proposed it on the floor, second reading on the bill, and she proposed an amendment to remove state tax dollars from the Kinsey Institute for the first time ever. It passed. overwhelmingly. But let me tell you, this young woman took a beating. Right after that passed, the Speaker of the House got off his high horse on his little podium and went down and railed on her. She took a serious beating for defunding the Kinsey Institute, but no less, she did it. So we're very thankful for that. This here is Michelle Peterson. She is the mom who's behind passing the anti-grooming bills. Her 15-year-old son was groomed by a former, I think it was coach. Hundreds of times he was receiving texts from this individual. She finally pushed and pushed and pushed and got Illinois, of all places, to pass the first anti-grooming bill. This anti-grooming bill is being used across the country now as the basis for which to go after predators, including those in sex trafficking. You can go to her website, michellepeterson.org, and you can see the list of states there. Missouri just passed theirs. You can see the list of states, and you can look at the different pieces of legislation. So as you start to push back here in the United Kingdom and Wales, take a look at those laws, because some of them are very, very strong, and sadly, Indiana's is the weakest. So where do we go from here? Well, it's time for action. I'm here to ask for your help. Because coming from the state of Indiana, I've watched as the Kinsey Institute and Indiana University have been protected beyond anything I've ever seen. Nobody will touch it. Nobody will fight it, including conservative organizations. They all turned a blind eye to it. But I made it my mission, and I told Dr. Reisman, I promise you, I will continue to go after it. So because Kinsey went global, I need your help. Because your kids are being a target of it as well. And here's what I ask you to do. A couple of really good things. This man right here is the new governor of the state of Indiana. And in 25, when I wanted to take further action against Kinsey Institute and the university, they said, well, hold on. We're going to let him take over the board of trustees. And by taking over the board of trustees, he'll be able to take action. But it's going to take a year. Well, it's now, what is today? April 18th? Almost a year. And they haven't done a darn thing to address the Institute. In fact, the Kinsey Institute is now, they're claiming, funded by the Indiana University Foundation. I said, okay, I'll sit back and I'll let you take action. We'll see what happens. So what did he do? He appointed 2 more foundation members to the board of trustees. So what I need you to do is let him know how you feel about that. I need you to let him know how you feel about Indiana impacting your nation and your nation's children. He needs to hear from you. He needs to hear the impact it's had on you. Okay? There's his phone number. There's his office address. Have fun. Next, if you didn't catch that, you can see me afterwards and you can get a screenshot of it, okay? Next, I want you to go after them. I want you to let the board of trustees know exactly how you feel about Indiana perverting your kids. They need to hear it, okay? I've been told, Jim Bop down here on the bottom left, second one in, oh, he's a strong conservative. Yeah, well, he hasn't done anything. In fact, he was supposed to call me months ago. I'm not sure what time frame he's working on, because it sure wasn't the same hourly time frame I was told. So I want you to let them know how you feel, okay? They need to hear. They need to hear the impact that Indiana has had on the children of Wales, the children of the United Kingdom. And I will leave you with this. Here's the information to the Institute. Please let them all know. They need to hear it. They need to hear how they've damaged your kids, your nation. Okay? That is the Institute. That is the statute. And this was when I went to DC with Dr. Reisman in 2020. She died in 21. We had the privilege of taking her to Bloomington in 2019 and putting her on the steps of the Kansas Institute, where she got to expose front and center what they had done. And then you will see there in the bottom right, this was Kinsey's house, where he performed a lot of sick things in that attic. And so we put Dr. Reisman on the sidewalk and let her just tell the entire busload of what he did in that house. This is where they started filming pornography that then spread worldwide. And as Clarence Tripp said, there was no harm done. They knew it was illegal. As he's talking about a young girl who's being raped by Rex King, also known as Mr. Green, because she's screaming as he's raping her. She's a young child, and he, a very large man. You can hear that straight out of his lips in your film, the UK film called Kinsey's Pedophiles. You will hear his own words. You will hear many of his people's own words. I encourage you to watch it. And then I encourage you to join with me and go after the governor of Indiana, the board of trustees, and the institute itself. Thank you.